My name is Jack Eschenroder. I'm a fisheries biologist with FISHBIO.
Unit 1, time 1630.
Much of our work focuses on monitoring migratory fish species in the Central Valley of California in the Sacramento and San Joaquin watersheds. These watersheds are home to a species of fish called Untitled Chapter, which is a complex species whose populations consist of both resident rainbow trout and migratory steelhead. In a recent publication, we took a look at the different challenges associated with monitoring this species and proposed some potential solutions to address these challenges. Rainbow trout and steelhead are just two different forms of the same species of fish. Rainbow trout spend their entire life in freshwater streams, whereas steelhead are born in freshwater streams but migrate to the ocean where they grow up to be adults before coming back to freshwater to spawn. Steelhead populations in the Central Valley have declined over the past century and a half, and this resulted in their being listed under the Endangered Species Act as a threatened species. For that reason, a lot of the research and monitoring that's taken place in the region has focused specifically on them. This means that there's a lot of questions about the rainbow trout and how they interact with the steelhead and the population as a whole that we can't answer with the data that we have. Although Oncorhynchus micus is one of the most highly studied fish species in the world, there are a lot of challenges associated with monitoring their populations in the wild. One of these is the fact that they live in these complex groups that include both rainbow trout and steelhead. It's also challenging because they tend to move or migrate during periods of very high flow, periods that are often challenging to use traditional monitoring gear like fish counting weirs or rotary screw traps. Another challenge arises from the fact that migratory steelhead can be quite rare in many of the rivers in the Central Valley. And if monitoring focuses specifically just on the individuals that migrate, you're potentially missing a really big portion of the population in a lot of rivers. In many rivers, rainbow trout represent a really large proportion of the population of Oncorhynchus micus, and they can really provide a very important contribution to that species population as a whole. Much of FISHBIO's monitoring work in the Central Valley focuses on the Stanislaus River, which is one of the most intensively monitored systems in the entire watershed. The monitoring we do there is pretty unique because we focus not only on the migratory steelhead, but also have programs specifically targeting resident rainbow trout as well. For monitoring migratory fish, we use gears like fish counting weirs, which are a means of tracking adults that are returning to the rivers to spawn, as well as rotary screw traps, which are a methodology designed to capture juvenile individuals that are moving out of the river downstream to the ocean. When it comes to monitoring the resident rainbow trout population, we use snorkel surveys, which are a means of having biologists go out into the field and basically count the rainbow trout and get an idea of their relative abundance from year to year and season to season. So even though there's an abundance of data from many years in the Stanislaus River, both on steelhead and rainbow trout, there's still questions we can't answer about the population in that river, and there's still additional work that needs to be done to collect the information necessary to understand how the steelhead in that system are doing. One of the main recommendations in our new paper is to rethink and redesign the monitoring of steelhead to capture the full range of their populations and rivers in the Central Valley and beyond. And this may mean redesigning monitoring programs that have focused specifically on migratory fish to expand them and include more monitoring focused on the often quite large resident rainbow trout populations in these rivers. Some of these ideas for expanded monitoring are currently being developed and deployed in the Stanislaus River in a new effort that's funded by the U.S. Bureau of Reclamation. FISHBIO is working to implement some of this expanded monitoring and trying to better understand steelhead in the system. The conditions in the Central Valley of today are very different than they were in the pre-dam era. And the cool water that's being released from dammed rivers and their reservoirs throughout the Central Valley may actually be favoring a resident life history in a lot of rivers. And for this reason, it's doubly important to understand those resident populations. Rainbow trout and steelhead are connected, and we need to understand both parts of the population to understand the species as a whole.